I thank the House. We shall move to questions without notice. Are there any questions? And I give the call to the Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. The Prime Minister has caused a lot of hurt. It's to the Prime Minister.
Order. Order.
The Prime Minister has caused a lot of pain to Australian families over the last 3 years. Will the Prime Minister join with me in cutting the price of petrol and diesel to save tradies, pensioners and families up to $28 a week instead of his 70-cent a day tax cut, which doesn't even come in for 15 months?
The call to the Prime Minister.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. I thank the Leader of the Opposition for his question. And of course, the Leader of the Opposition, I wonder if he gave that speech or that question when he was sitting in the Cabinet room when indexation of petrol was reintroduced in the 2014 budget. I wonder if when he sat there,
members on my
when
left
he sat there and reintroduced indexation in 2014, I wonder if he gave that range.
Order. The Prime Minister was asked a question by the Leader of the Opposition on an opposition policy, so there's going to be some pretty broad
on this policy.
Order. So we'll just deal with the manager's point of order, but just in light of what I've said.
Sure. Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister is not involved. Point of order is on relevance. The Prime Minister can't give us a history on 100 years of excise. That cannot be relevant to the question. It does not mean that, for example, the Prime Minister can talk about things that happened 100 years ago, which he would like to do.
Thanks.
He's got to be
I thank the manager. Order. Order. You've made your point, and thank you. Order. Order. Everyone. The Leader of the Nationals. Everyone's just going to take a deep breath. The Prime Minister was asked about an alternative approach and alternative policy by the opposition, so I'm going to listen carefully. If he's got some context about the policy that he was asked about that the Leader of the Opposition has announced, he will be directly relevant.
Speaker, I'm talking about the temporary one-year decrease that they have said they will put out there. The Morrison leftovers have adopted the policy of the Morrison government, just like they did in 2022, Mr Speaker, where in the budget in 2022 they brought in a temporary measure and then it disappeared. And that's what I'm asked about. And the reason why it's at the level it is today is because of the legislation that they brought in 2014. That is why it is at the level it is today.
Order. The Leader of the Nationals.
But those opposite have a view where this morning
members on my left,
having voted against tax cuts for every taxpayer yesterday, they this morning have declared they are the first opposition to ever say, if you elect us to government, we will increase the taxes for every single taxpayer. Every single taxpayer will pay more tax if they are elected at the election in May. So what we know now is that they have 4 policies. They have a nuclear power plan of $600 billion that they have to find cuts for. Then they have their lunches, their lunch policy. We haven't forgotten about that. And then they have the further cuts that they've spoken about. But now they have something else as well, Mr Speaker, because we know that the only thing they don't want to cut is people's taxes. Not only do they not want to cut them, not only do they vote against them, what they want to do is to actually jack them up for every single taxpayer. An extraordinary policy from those opposite who just don't get it, who have not put forward a single lasting cost of living plan and opposed every single measure that we have put forward.
We'll hear from the honourable member for Dunkley.
My question is to the Prime Minister. How is the Albanese Labor government helping Australians earn more and keep more of what they earn? And is there any opposition to this?
Give the call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Dunkley for her question. And indeed, we do want, as a government, for people to earn more and to keep more of what they earn. And as it turns out, there is a bit of opposition to that, Mr. Speaker.
To both.
There is a bit of opposition to both, because those opposite have opposed all of our measures, the changes to the definition of casual, same job, same pay, the right to disconnect, the increases for people on minimum award wages. They've opposed every one of the measures that we've put in place, including the increases for aged care and childcare workers that they describe as a waste. But they're also opposed to people keeping more of what they earn. We have, as a direct result of our policy, seen real wages increase 5 quarters in a row. We are seeing per capita living standards increase in the last figures. And we are also seeing Australians keep more of what they earn because of our legislation last year that provided a tax relief not for some but for every single Australian taxpayer. And that is why we're topping that up, so that people will earn $2,500 extra in their pockets as a result of the legislation that passed the Senate last night. But those opposite have the hand in the pockets of Australian workers to rip that money out, Mr. Speaker. Not only do they want them to earn less, they want them to keep less as well. Now, during the election campaign, I was asked if I would support that $1 an hour, increase. It's back, Mr. Speaker.
Members
For
on my
workers
left.
on the minimum wage, and I said absolutely, absolutely. Now, last night, when this morning the Shadow Treasurer, where he was asked would he take back the tax cuts and would he legislate to actually jack up taxes for every Australian taxpayer, guess what word he used? He said we absolutely would. Absolutely. And that says it all about the stark contrast between the two sides of the House, Mr. Speaker. On this side, we absolutely want people to earn more, and we absolutely want people to keep more of what they earn. Those opposite absolutely want people to earn less, and they absolutely want them to be taxed more. That is the decision that the Australian people will have to determine. Labor is the party of lower taxes. The Liberals want you earning less and keeping less. And you know you hit a nerve, Mr. Speaker. You know you hit a nerve by how loudly they shout.
Order. The Minister for Home Affairs. I think everyone can agree the noise level is way too high. So I'm going to ask everyone to help me in that quest to lower the noise. So that's on every individual to do their bit. Give the call to the Shadow Treasurer.
My question is to the Treasurer. The Treasurer has said, quote, "The reason why we support fuel excise relief, we want to see people under less pressure at the bowser. Nothing could make me happier than if there was some pressure taken off families who are doing it tough. Why is the Treasurer now refusing to cut the fuel excise to provide immediate relief to cash-strapped Australian families?"
Order. Give the call to the Treasurer.
Mr. Speaker, the first point that I would make is if the Shadow Treasurer cared about the cost of living, he wouldn't be the first Shadow Treasurer in living memory to take to an election a policy to increase income taxes on every single Australian taxpayer. That's the first and most obvious point Mr. Speaker. Now, in relation to petrol, what we did on Tuesday night from this dispatch box is we found a way to give ongoing cost of living relief to every Australian taxpayer. Our combination of cost of living relief, whether it's cheaper medicines, cutting student debt, strengthening Medicare, tax cuts, energy bill relief, a combination of temporary and permanent ongoing cost of living relief in the budget that we handed down on Tuesday night, Mr. Speaker. Now, he's asked me about comments from just before the last election. And that's a very welcome opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to tell the House that when during the week of the last budget of those opposite, on the eve of the last election, petrol prices in Sydney were $2.15 a litre. They're now $1.95 a litre. Petrol prices in Canberra, $2.08 before the last election, $1.92 now. $2.15 in Melbourne, before the last election, $1.70 now. $2.17 in Brisbane, before the last election, $1.93 now. $2.18 in Adelaide, before the last election, $1.82 now. $2.03 before the last election in Perth, $1.75 now. $2.09 in Darwin, before the last election, $1.81 now. $2.23 in Hobart, before the last election, $1.82 now, according to the Australian Institute of Petroleum weekly price report, Mr. Speaker. Now, we have found a much more effective way to help Australians with the cost of living. And the key difference between our cost of living package and what those opposite have come up with on the back of a coaster in the last couple of days, Mr. Speaker, is we will provide ongoing cost of living help to every Australian taxpayer. And not only do they oppose that, Mr. Speaker, not only did they vote against that in the House and in the Senate yesterday, Mr. Speaker, but quite bizarrely, unusually in historical terms, the Shadow Treasurer was asked this morning, will he legislate to increase taxes on all 14 million Australian taxpayers, and he said absolutely he would. And as the Prime Minister has pointed out, the difference between this side and that side, Prime Minister asked would he increase the minimum wage, he said absolutely. Those opposite asked will they jack up taxes for every working taxpayer in this country, and they said absolutely, and that goes right to the difference.
Give a call to the honourable member for Bennelong.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Education. What is the Albanese Labor government doing to support students and graduates, and are there any risks to this support?
Call to the Minister for Education.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank my friend, the brilliant member for Bennelong, for his question. Mr. Speaker, the first thing that the Liberals will do if they win the next election is raise taxes for every Australian worker. And the first thing that Labor will do is cut student debt by 20% for 3 million Australians. So they want to jack up taxes. We want to lighten your load. For the average Australian with a student debt, this will lighten the load by more than $5,000. In the member for Brisbane's electorate, for example, there are 34,000 people who will benefit. That will save money. The average person there will save about $6,500. In the member for Griffith's electorate, there are 31,000 people who will benefit. The average person there will save $6,400. The member for Ryan's electorate, there are 27,000 people who will benefit, and the average saving there is about $6,000. The member for Wentworth, I know, will be pleased to know that in her electorate, 23,600 people will benefit. The average saving there is about $6,600. The member for Fowler's electorate, next door to mine, there are 23,000 people that will see their HEX debt cut. The saving there is about $6,000. And in the member for Curtin's electorate in WA, more than 22,000 people will benefit. The saving there is around $5,800 on average. So from Western Sydney to Western Australia, there are millions of Aussies who are going to save thousands of bucks. In fact, according to the Australian newspaper, in analysis not provided by me,
the electorate with the highest HECS to average salary ratio is Laxale in Western Sydney. Good local member. Almost 26,000 people there will save on average $6,127. And the Liberal Party are opposed to all of that. In fact, when we announced this policy, the Shadow Treasurer said there are no free lunches in economics. Remember that? Well, it turns out now they're going to jack up your taxes to pay for free lunches for bosses. You've got to think to yourself, how ordinary is that? I know the opposition leader spent a lot of time checking out the All Ordinaries during the GFC. If he wants to see the All Ordinaries now, he just has to look behind him. Because they're all ordinary.
Order. Has the minister concluded his answer? Has the minister concluded his answer? Has the minister concluded his answer? Order. Order. When the House comes to order, we'll hear from the honourable member for Goldstein.
Speaker, my question is to the Prime Minister. People in Goldstein are constantly raising with me their concerns about the stability of the Australia-US relationship under the Trump administration and whether it's sensible to be spending billions on the AUKUS deal when even the US Congressional Budget Office says the submarines may never be delivered. What is your plan B?
Call to the Prime Minister.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. Well, my plan is to implement the AUKUS arrangements that we're committed to. And I do that for a range of reasons. I do that primarily, though, for one reason, which is that it's in the Australian national interest for us to have the best defence assets that are possibly available to Australia. And when we have briefings, and I'm happy to arrange for appropriate briefings for the member for Goldstein on these matters. If you are an island continent located where we are, the best assets that you can possibly have is a submarine, but importantly you have to then ask yourself what is the best form of submarine in terms of stealth, in terms of capacity to go long distances whilst not having to snort and rise to the surface. What is the way that you can ensure that you are not detectable? And the answer to that is nuclear-powered submarines. That is something that we have supported because we think it is absolutely essential for Australia's national interests. But that is just one. How can I not?
The Prime Minister was asked about the AUKUS deal and the relationship with the US. Is giving exactly the answer to the question that the member asked. But members are entitled to raise one point of order on relevance, and the member has the call.
Thank you, Speaker. It is on relevance. The question went to either the capacity or the willingness of the US to deliver such subs.
Well, as I said, the Prime Minister is directly talking about the topic he was asked about. He couldn't be more directly relevant. If he was talking about other agreements or other deals, he wouldn't be relevant. But whilst he's talking about the topic he was asked about, he's within the standing orders and he has the call.
Speaker. The AUKUS arrangements, though, also have within them Pillar 2. And what that's about is the capacity for us to lift up our capacity for advanced manufacturing, for really the most high-tech manufacturing that you can have. One of the things about the defence industry is that there's spin-offs as well. I'm very committed to a future made in Australia. One of the ways that we can do that, and that's why the National Reconstruction Fund, for example, has a component in it about innovation for defence industries. And working with the United States, which is the most advanced in terms of, obviously, the largest military in the world, with the defence industries that they have, there are already companies, Australian companies such as Austal, for example, that are located there in the United States. A fantastic operation, of course, based in Western Australia primarily. That will bring great benefit to Australia. Now, with regard to the support for the AUKUS arrangements in the United States and the UK, I've met with over 100 congresspeople and senators in the United States. There was overwhelming support from both Republican and Democrat people who are elected representatives. I have raised this issue in the discussions I've had with President Trump as well, and he has expressed his support, as of course Prime Minister Starmer in the United Kingdom, who I had a talk with just less than 2 weeks ago. So we will continue to put in place these arrangements because it is in Australia's national interest, and I'm confident that an important part of the defence of this country is the AUKUS arrangements.
On indulgence for the Leader of Opposition to associate his remarks with the Prime Minister.
Well, thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I think that was a pretty good answer, and I wanted to support the Prime Minister on what I think is an issue of national significance and importance. The Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister have rightly pointed out that we live in the most precarious period since the end of the Second World War, and it's based on intelligence and the advice of the best people in uniform, and not just here in Australia but in Europe and in other allies' intelligence networks as well. And so it is appropriate that we make this investment, and I think the Prime Minister, when he was the then Leader of the Opposition, made a brave call in supporting the then government's decision to go with the AUKUS nuclear-propelled submarine. It's a safe technology. It provides the stealth capacity that the Prime Minister pointed out. It gives us the best in class of the technology, and it allows us to project and to provide defences to our country in a very uncertain century. And I think to question that is not wise, not in our national interest. And I think it is important for the Australian public and for our allies to hear that there is and there always will remain a bipartisan position when it comes to the submarines. As the first line of defence, it will underpin our national security for decades and decades to come.
The call to the member for Paterson.
Thanks, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Resources. How's the Albanese Labor government ensuring that Australians, households and businesses have access to affordable and reliable gas supply? And how does this compare to other gas policies, Minister?
Give the call to the Honourable the Minister for Resources and the Minister for Northern Australia.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. And I want to thank the member for Paterson for her question. She is a very important supporter of the very important Hunter Power Project in Kurri. She understands, like this government understands, that Australian homes and businesses rely on gas, and that gas will play a very important role in the transition to net zero as a backup for renewable energy, but also as a really important support for the industries of tomorrow, like the processing of critical minerals. Under this, the Albanese Labor government, we have driven down gas prices and freed up more gas for Australians. We have secured over 640 petajoules of gas for the domestic market through the mandatory code, enough gas to power Queensland for 2 years. We have reduced gas prices to around $12 compared to $30 when the Coalition was in power. Our policies are ensuring that Australians have access to reliable and affordable gas where and when it is needed. I'm asked how this compares to other policies. Well, I'd like to remind everyone here that those opposite voted against every single measure I have just gone through. They have voted against all cost of living measures. They have voted against cheaper gas. They have voted against energy price relief. The opposition have voted against gas price caps that reduced energy bills. And, Mr Speaker, I'll remind everyone watching that the Liberals and the Nationals together have voted against a tax cut for all Australians. Now they've also, of course, promised to make sure those tax cuts are repealed, and the Liberals now become, of course, the party of higher taxes. Mr Speaker, those opposite left the gas market in utter chaos. The Coalition were warned about projected gas shortfalls in 2014, in 2016, in 2017, in 2019, in 2020 and in 2022. And, Mr Speaker, you might ask, well, what did they do about it? Well, of course, they did absolutely nothing, Mr Speaker. AEMO and the ACCC warned them, and all they did was pass a regulation to hide just how much they had driven up energy prices. Mr Speaker, their shambles of a gas-fired recovery was all hot air. It gifted millions of taxpayer dollars to the gas industry and left us with a national energy market shut down and supply shortages and barely an extra molecule into the system. And their domestic security mechanism could only come into play once a year, and of course, thankfully, we have reformed that. Now, what's next for the Coalition and their gas policy? We can be assured it will be slogans over substance. Well, because they say they'll have lower prices, but they vote against the price caps. They've even said they're going to release onshore gas when they've got absolutely no federal jurisdiction to do it. Well, if past performance is an indicator of future performance, all we know is the coalition are going to ruin the gas market just like they did the last.
Call to the Shadow Treasurer.
Prime Minister, given families are hurting because of Labor's cost of living crisis, what was the logic in delaying by 15 months the Prime Minister's 70 cents a day tax cut?
Order. 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 Members on my right, the Treasurer, the Minister of Energy, the Prime Minister has the call.
Mr. Speaker, I really thank the Shadow Treasurer for that question, because what I'm asked by the Shadow Treasurer is why isn't the policy which will lower further, top up our tax cuts right for every taxpayer, all 14 million of them, next year and then the year after, making a total with the top-up of $2,500 less tax being paid for average taxpayers. Why haven't you done something that they voted against sooner? That is what they've asked, Mr. Speaker. But that wouldn't be quite so bad, because it's not just why haven't you done what we opposed sooner? He's actually asked, why haven't you done what we're going to repeal and reverse sooner? Having stood up now and declared this morning that he would absolutely impose higher taxes on every taxpayer, he then says, why didn't you just do the reverse sooner? It's just extraordinary. They have voted against every measure of cost of living support. And on Tuesday night, it wasn't just the lower taxes that the Treasurer spoke about on Tuesday night. It was the cheaper medicines. We know they opposed that. It was the energy bill relief. We know that they opposed that. They opposed the cap on gas and coal prices. We know that they opposed the cuts of $3 billion for student debt, and they oppose the future cuts that we will put in place that will cut student debt by 20%, leading to an average $5,500 benefit for 3 million Australians. They oppose that. $5,500 for 3 million Australians. We know that they have proposed the measures that we've put in place that have allowed first 11 million Australians get access to their GP just with bulk billing. We know that they actually support a tax every time people visit a GP rather than that. We know that they've called the largest increase in rent assistance in 30 years waste, all of the measures that we have put in place. Now, those opposite who have the hide to come in here and say, why don't you do what we oppose sooner? It says all about the lack of logic in their team. No wonder they've come up with this rubbish.
Time has concluded. Give the call to the honourable member for Gilmore.
My question is to the Treasurer. How is the Labor government lowering taxes for Australian workers? What obstacles are standing in the way?
Give the call to the Treasurer.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. Thanks to the member for Gilmore, not just for the question, but for voting for a tax cut for every single one of her 64,000 taxpayers in that wonderful part of the world that she represents. Now, last night the Parliament passed the government's tax cuts from the 2025 budget. Those tax cuts are now law. And because of our tax cuts, this means the average benefit is $50 a week, including those top-ups in the budget. And this means that the first rate of tax now is the lowest that it's been in half a century. And what that means for Australians is that more Australians are working, earning more and keeping more of what they earn because of this Labor government, Mr Speaker. and it was part of a broader package of cost of living relief, which was one of the centrepieces of Tuesday night's budget. Now, Mr Speaker, this morning on radio and then on TV, the Shadow Treasurer made a stunningly stupid admission, Mr Speaker. He said that if those opposite win the election, they will legislate to increase income taxes for every single Australian taxpayer. Now, as far as we can tell, Mr Speaker, this is unprecedented. This has never happened before, that an alternative government has gone to the people and said, elect us and we will jack up income taxes for every single taxpayer. I can't imagine they're happy about this up the back, Mr Speaker, and that's why they're pretending to read and they're looking at their shoes once again. Because this confirms beyond any doubt that if they win the election, Australians will earn less and keep less of what they earn. It makes it absolutely crystal clear that Australians will be worse off if those opposite win the election, Mr Speaker. And it's now not just us saying it, it's the Shadow Treasurer saying it as well. And as a consequence, they would increase tax to GDP, they would increase average tax rates, they would give back no bracket creep, Mr Speaker, and they'd harm participation. Now, this will haunt them for every single day of this election campaign, because this renders anything else the Leader of the Opposition says tonight absolutely meaningless, Mr Speaker, because it sets up a very, very simple choice in this election. And it springs from the budget we released on Tuesday and the reply that we'll hear tonight and what the Shadow Treasurer said this morning. This election is about a very simple choice. This Labor Prime Minister and this Labor government cutting taxes and helping Australians with the cost of living, or that opposition leader and that coalition clown show, jacking up income taxes and making people worse off. The Shadow Treasurer has admitted as much today.
Order. Give a call to the honourable member for Wannon.
My question is to the Prime Minister. In Labor's cruel hoax of a budget, 1.8 million new arrivals are predicted to live in Australia over a 5-year period. Can the Prime Minister guarantee that this number won't go beyond 2 million?
Order. The member for Lyons. Order. Members on my right. Order. The member for Fadden will leave the chamber under 94A. And the member for Braddon will stop dobbing on people. Order. There's far too much noise. Members are entitled to ask their question in silence. I don't know why everyone thinks it's inappropriate to do so, but it's the same rules applying today as every other day. The Leader of the House has the call.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. And the guarantee is simple, that only a Labor government can return immigration to sustainable levels. That is absolutely... And the laughter is loudest from the man who went the other direction in the strongest possible way. Because to get immigration back to sustainable levels, we had to first make sure that we were restoring integrity to the system.
Order.
Because let's not forget the way integrity had been taken from the system under those opposite. Let's not forget what was said and what came out.
Pretty relevant.
The Deputy Prime Minister will cease interjecting. We're going to hear from the member for Wannon on a point of order.
Speaker, it was a very direct question. It didn't go to alternatives at all. It asked for a guarantee that it wouldn't go beyond 2 million. It didn't ask about anything in the past. It was a very direct question. Guarantee that it won't go beyond 2 million.
All you need to do, Member Wannon, is just state the point of order on relevance, which I understand. The Minister was asked a specific question on a specific topic. You probably want a yes or no answer, right? So we'll say the same thing I've said many, many times. Under the standing orders, I can't direct the Minister to do that. It would be a lot easier for me if I could, trust me. But he's entitled to talk about the policy in terms of being directly relevant, about perhaps the guarantee and why it's possible or not possible. I don't know what he's going to say. So he'll just need to make sure the context that he's talking about the topic, and I'm not sure where he's going with this, but he is being directly relevant because he's talking about it. If he started talking about something else, we'd bring him to line. But he has the call.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. So to deal with net overseas migration, which the question asks about, you have to go to the components of net overseas migration. Now, the area that had the biggest growth was international students. So for net overseas migration, the 31% reduction that we've had year on year in the most recent figures is a direct reflection of the fact that this government has taken action on the unlimited nature of how international student visas were in place. Now, when it was actually put to the parliament whether that should be fixed, those opposite, including the Shadow Minister who just asked the question, didn't amend the bill to say, oh, maybe it should be a different number. They actually voted for student visas to be unlimited in Australia. Unlimited in Australia. That's their position, and then they want to get up and ask about what will happen with respect to net overseas migration. There is a gap from a previous speech that the Leader of the Opposition gave where he claimed a number as to how low he would get net overseas migration. He's made a couple of announcements to it, but he's actually still 220,000 places short. 220,000. If you reduced the student visa system to zero, you still would not fix that gap. You still would not fix that gap. And it's not surprising that those opposite have no idea about how to run a system that is sustainable with integrity. Because let's have a look at what was said in terms of the Richardson review about how the Leader of the Opposition ran immigration. A company whose owners were suspected through the ownership of another company of seeking to circumvent US sanctions against Iran, had extensive suspicious money movements suggesting money laundering, bribery and other criminal activity. Those opposite ran a system in complete disrepair. Complete disrepair. The only visa that they've said they will now act on is to bring back the one known as cash for visas, where you qualify for a visa to Australia on the basis that you've got cash and that's it.
Give a call to the member for Lingiari.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Health. Minister, how is the Albanese Labor government strengthening Medicare by investing in bulk billing? Why is it important to strengthen Medicare after a decade of cuts and neglect? And Minister, are there any threats to a stronger Medicare?
Good call to the Minister for Health and Aged Care.
Yeah, thank you, Speaker, and to the member for Lingiari, because for her and for everyone on this side of the House, bulk billing is the beating heart of Medicare, and it was in free fall when we came to government. That's why, of course, in our second budget, we tripled the bulk billing incentive for pensioners, concession card holders and kids, which it delivered last year an additional 6 million free visits to the doctor, lifting bulk billing for that cohort up above 90% again. But we know it's still under pressure for other Australians, which is why in the fourth budget this week we've extended for the first time bulk billing support to every single Australian, because we know that seeing a doctor for free is not just good for your hip pocket, Mr Speaker, it's also good for your health. Now, I was surprised, Mr Speaker, yesterday when the Leader of the Opposition interrupted his speech explaining why he was going to vote against a tax cut for every Australian taxpayer to brag about his record on bulk billing. Surprised but not disappointed, Mr Speaker, because sport, I don't think you understand how much we love it when you talk about your record as Health Minister. I don't think you understand how much it warms the cockles of our heart. We hope you do it a lot more over coming weeks. Because, yes, bulk billing was 84% because he inherited a very good position from the former Labor government. A very good position. But he then said there were too many free Medicare services, Mr Speaker. We all remember that. He then tried to abolish bulk billing altogether, Mr Speaker, and make every single Australian pay a fee every single time they went to the doctor. Make every single Australian pay a fee every single time they walked through the front door of an emergency department, because that is what this man wants, Mr Speaker, in this country. An American-style user-pay system of health care, not Australia's Medicare. And if you think that that sorry, sad old leopard, the Liberal Party, has changed its spot, listen to what the Shadow Health Minister said in the Senate only a few weeks ago. Senator Ruston said, "At no time have I or anybody from the Coalition ever suggested that the only card you need to take to the doctor going forward is your Medicare card." And that is the choice, Mr Speaker, over coming weeks. That is the choice. It's about the value of this beautiful green card. For Labor, this card is everything, Mr Speaker, absolutely everything. Under the Liberals, under this man, the most important card when you're going to the doctor is your credit card, because when this man cuts Medicare, and he will again, all Australians are going to end up paying.
The call to the Honourable the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Minister for Small Business. Last night, Labor was dragged kicking and screaming into doing the bare minimum on the instant asset write-off. Mr Speaker,
Order.
This is an important question.
Members on my right, I've just said to members on my left that people shouldn't interject during questions before a minister speaks. So I'm going to ask for assistance from the House so the Deputy Leader can ask her question again and be heard in silence.
My question is to the Minister for Small Business. Last night, Labor was dragged kicking and screaming into doing the bare minimum on the instant asset write-off, shamed into passing legislation to extend it to the end of this financial year. But there is still no money budgeted for its extension for next financial year. Will Labor support coalition efforts to make the instant asset write-off permanent, including lifting the amount small businesses can depreciate to $30,000?
The call to the Minister for Small Business.
Magic.
Well, thanks, Mr Speaker, and I do thank the member opposite for that question. Well, I was pleased to finally see their support for the instant asset write-off to get through the parliament last night, Mr Speaker. After 8 months, they finally got there, can I say? But this is not the only time, of course, they have delayed us trying to introduce the instant asset write-off. This is actually the third time in a row they've tried to delay this legislation getting through the parliament, and it's because, of course, they know that we have been supporting small businesses with targeted support for our term. Indeed, over $2 billion worth of targeted support for small businesses since we have come to office. $2 billion, some of which you have voted against. You've delayed the instant asset write-off. You've voted against the direct energy bill relief. And then, of course, Mr Speaker, those opposite are now saying that they want to go to the election with higher taxes for small business owners and workers. Higher taxes. Australia's 1.5 million sole traders will be pleased to know that those opposite want them to pay higher income taxes, Mr Speaker.
The Manager of Opposition, a point of order.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. The question was very tight and it asked if the point of order is on relevance, and the question was to the Minister for Small Business whether she could guarantee to small businesses that the instant asset write-off would be extended for future income years, because those small businesses are making decisions today about whether they make those investments. So the Small Business Minister should respond to that aspect of the question, which is at the heart of it.
I appreciate the manager would like her to address that part of the question. Maybe make his life easier, make my life easier, but that's not the rules. The rules are she's got to be directly relevant to the whole question, not just one part, or can't pick and choose. So it's all or nothing, and it's all in this standing orders. So she's being directly relevant. She's giving the reasons as she was asked a decision why or why not. So she's being directly relevant, and she'll have the call.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. It's no wonder that they don't want me to continue to talk about how they want higher taxes for small business sole traders, Mr Speaker. 1.5 million of them. 1.5 million small business owners are sole traders who are getting a tax cut because of our government, a tax cut that you want to take off them. You want to go to the next election with higher taxes for those sole traders. We have been very clear as a government that we want to support small businesses in a targeted way, and that is exactly what we have been doing in our time of government. More than $2 billion of targeted support, including the instant asset rider for the last 3 years. The Treasurer and the Prime Minister have been very clear that when that legislation went through, we will be considering what other measures we will take to support small businesses.
Well, there was one point of order taken on relevance. Well, this is a good lesson for everyone. So in future, that's fine. There'll only be one point of order on relevance then. No one will get up and take a second point of order. We'll now hear from the member for Corangamite.
My question is to the Minister for Early Childhood Education. What action has the Albanese Labor government taken to build a universal early education system that is simple, affordable and accessible for every family? Is there anything that could put this at risk and leave families worse off?
Give a call to the Minister for Early Childhood Education and the Minister assisting the Minister for the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and I do thank the wonderful member for Corangamite for her question. The member for Corangamite has demonstrated her commitment to children and families in her electorate by backing in every single one of our cost of living measures, whether that's on health, whether that's on tax relief and whether indeed that's on early childhood education and care. Mr Speaker, in our first term of government, we've made progress towards our vision of a simple, affordable and accessible early childhood education and care system. On affordability, our cheaper childcare reduced the out-of-pocket costs for early childhood education and care by 17% when it was first introduced. That means that a family on $120,000 is $2,768 better off because of this government. And we're building on that by putting in fee caps as well. On workforce, of course, underpins the reforms that we want to make in early childhood education and care. We introduced reforms to stabilise and grow the workforce. Our 15% pay rise, I'm pleased to say, now has applications that cover around 80% of early childhood education workforce. And we have a $72 million workforce package, and as well as our fee-free TAFE helping to grow that sector. And because of these actions, we now have 41,900 more educators in the sector. But it doesn't stop there. Recently, we changed the Liberals' prohibitive activity test, replacing that with a 3-day guarantee of subsidised care. That means 70,000 families will save $1,370 in the first year alone. And we've dedicated $1 billion to grow early childhood education services in areas where they're needed, including rural, region and outer suburbs, to be run by high-quality, not-for-profit service providers. But, Mr Speaker, we know there's more to do, and that's why we've commissioned a service delivery price to inform our future reform. And I'm asked about risks. Well, today the ANU Centre for Social Research confirms that around 2/3 of all Australians, led by single-parent families and middle-income families, have gained up to $2,500 through our tax cuts, childcare and parental leave since the Albanese Labor government came into office. That's real money into the pockets of families. And that is how you do cost of living relief. That is how you do it. And this is how you risk it. You risk it by voting for an opposition that has no vision, no plan, no policy. While we're reforming education to build a better future for the next generation, the opposition wants to keep the next generation paying for their $600 billion nuclear fantasy.
Good call to the member for Wentworth.
My question's for the Treasurer. Tuesday's budget showed our fiscal position in structural deficit for the next decade. That concerns many of the people of Wentworth. What is the government's plan, apart from bracket creep, to address the structural deficit?
Call to the Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank the honourable member for her question. I also acknowledge the 104,000 taxpayers who will get 2 more tax cuts in her electorate because of Tuesday night's budget. I also wanted to acknowledge that the member for Wentworth is a frequent and considered contributor to the national debate about tax reform. And I assure her that the government's focus is on implementing the broad and ambitious tax reform agenda that we have laid out over the course of 4 budgets now. Obviously, and the member referred to this in her question, but the tax cuts for every taxpayer is about returning bracket creep, increasing participation. We're also ensuring multinationals pay their fair share of tax here in Australia. We're encouraging investment in important areas like housing and clean energy with our tax breaks.
The Treasurer will just pause for a moment so I can hear the member. If the Treasurer can just pause for a moment.
So on relevance, the question was about structural deficit, not tax cuts.
Just bring the Treasurer back to the question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Speaker. And the reason I'm running through these tax reforms because a number of them improve the structural position of the budget, which I think the honourable member understands, including the changes to the PRRT, which will see the offshore LNG industry pay more tax sooner, as well as the efforts on tax compliance. Now, Mr Speaker, one of the defining features of the government's 4 budgets has been responsible economic management, and that has made a difference in the near term to the position of the budget, but also to the structural position of the budget that the honourable member asks me about. The fact that we've engineered the biggest ever nominal turnaround in the budget in a parliamentary term, $207 billion improvement, the fact that we delivered those 2 budget surpluses, the fact that we got the deficit down this year and delivered an improvement every year, what that means for the structural position is that we save a lot in interest costs. The fact that interest costs are down is making a major, meaningful difference to the structural budget position. In addition to that, we've also taken steps, and here I pay tribute to the former member for Maribyrnong and Minister Rishworth for their efforts. The steps we've taken on the NDIS are about structural improvements to the budget. The steps that the Aged Care Minister and the Health Minister have taken in the aged care budget are about making the budget more sustainable as well. But those interest cost difference, the fact that we've got that debt down by $177 billion this year, is going to save about $60 billion over the life of the medium term in the budget, and that's making a structural difference too. And so, if the honourable member's question is there ongoing more work to do in terms of the structural position of the budget? Of course there is, but we shouldn't dismiss or diminish the very, very substantial progress that this government has made cleaning up the mess that we inherited from those opposite.
The call to the honourable member for Holt.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. How is the budget helping Australians with the cost of living? Are there any threats to this cost of living support?
Call to the Treasurer.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and thank you to the outstanding member for Holt for her great question. I wanted to acknowledge more broadly that as the government puts together their cost of living agenda, it's wonderful local members like the member for Holt who helps us put that together, because on this side of the House we understand the cost of living pressures that people are under, even as we make really encouraging progress in the fight against inflation. We saw more progress yesterday in the inflation figures, which came down in a headline sense, but also in an underlying sense. And what that means is, as a government, we're getting inflation down, real wages are up, unemployment's low, we're getting the debt down, interest rates have started to come down, and growth is rebounding solidly in our economy as well. So we've made a lot of progress together as Australians, but we know that people are still under pressure, and that's why there is more work to do. Now, that is the primary motivation. The cost of living pressures that Australians feel, despite the progress we've made together on inflation, is the primary motivation for the cost of living package which was in Tuesday night's budget, Mr Speaker. We know that the cost of living is front of mind for a lot of Australians, and that's why it was front and centre in Tuesday night's budget as well. And that budget contained a coherent and comprehensive package of cost of living assistance, Mr Speaker. Energy bill relief, cheaper medicines, we're cutting student debt, We're strengthening Medicare because we know that more bulk billing means less pressure on families around Australia, Mr Speaker, and we've got those 2 new tax cuts to top up the tax relief that is already flowing despite the opposition of those opposite, Mr Speaker. Now, the Shadow Treasurer's brain snap today makes it really clear that they would legislate higher taxes for every single Australian taxpayer. Under those opposite, as we've said, Australians would earn less and keep less of what they earn, Mr Speaker, and that's because they want to cut everything except taxes for workers. So whatever the opposition leader says tonight, it is already very, very clear that they are about 3 things: higher taxes for workers, secret cuts to pay for nuclear reactors, and no ongoing help with the cost of living, Mr Speaker. So this does set up a very simple choice at the election. This Labor Prime Minister and his Labor government cutting taxes and helping people with the cost of living, or that opposition leader and that coalition jacking up income taxes and making people worse off.
Call to the member for Cowper.
My question is to the Prime Minister. Given the cost of living crisis Australian families are facing, with the price of everything going up, will the Prime Minister put politics aside and join with the opposition's plan to give immediate relief for family budgets by halving the fuel excise?
Order. Order. The Prime Minister has the call.
I thank the member for Cowper for his question. And one of the distinctions to be drawn here is between permanent cost of living relief and something that is temporary, that's borrowed from the Morrison government. The leftovers of the Morrison government have borrowed the leftovers of the Morrison government's policy.
Order.
When in the March 2022 budget they proposed something very similar that then just disappeared. And they've had time to think about it since, Mr Speaker, and indeed they've made comments about it since, very helpfully. This is what the Leader of the Opposition said. October 2023. There can be temporary relief through a reduction of excise if they believe that's going to be a benefit. It's costly and it can be gamed by the oil giants. That's what he said. Not to be outdone, the Shadow Treasurer. So whilst putting more money in people's pockets through a fuel excise might sound good, the problem is it's not actually solving the inflation problem, and you'll see price rises elsewhere as a result. 5th of December 2023. Senator Jane Hume, the finance spokesperson, putting subsidies on fuel prices, you want to say, can in fact fuel the inflationary fire rather than temper it. November 2023. There's more, just in case you think that was a one-off. Maybe they said this in the Shadow Cabinet meeting, if it went there. Said this, there's 2 problems with it. One is it could all be eaten up with global volatility in a moment. In a moment. So people might not actually feel that in their hip pocket. That's what they had to say. But it wasn't just the people with portfolio responsibility.
Order. The member for Cowper.
The member for New England got in on it. He was asked whether it had helped, and he said this, no, it won't. But what it will do is it'll take money away that we spend on roads. That's what he had to say. And the current Shadow Transport Minister was in on the joke as well, Mr Speaker. She said, Senator McKenzie, always good for a quote, I think just pulling one lever such as fuel excise won't deliver the whole of economy response and relief that Australians are looking for. Mr Speaker, they have spent 3 years bagging this policy that he's going to announce tonight. 3 years. 3 years, because they know that this temporary relief is no substitute for the permanent cost of living relief that we've delivered and they've voted against.
Order. We shall hear order. Members on my left, the member for Herbert, the Minister for Pacific Island Affairs will cease interjecting. Give a call to the honourable member for Boothby.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Housing and Homelessness. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering more housing, and what is threatening that progress?
Give a call to the Minister for Housing and the Minister for Homelessness.
Thanks, Speaker, and I want to thank the member for Boothby for this question and just acknowledge what really significant housing expertise she's brought to our caucus in this term. It was absolutely fantastic too to be in her community of Panorama, where the member and I met Housing Australia Future Fund tenants. Every single one of those houses, Speaker, being lived in by a person whose life has been transformed by our government's commitment to social and affordable housing. Now, Speaker, I've said to the parliament before, we've got a housing crisis in this country that's been a generation in the making, and particularly exacerbated by the decade of waste and neglect that we saw on the other side of the chamber. Speaker, when we were elected in May 22, we inherited a housing horror show. Let me take you through some of the numbers. The cost of building a home when we came to government was rising at 17%, Speaker. That is the highest rate in half a century. New builds were down, approvals were on a steep decline, and of course all of our housing affordability metrics were getting worse. And that's what you get, Speaker, when you have people sitting on the benches behind me for almost a decade when they didn't even bother to have a housing minister. Now, in 2022, Speaker, of course, this all changed. About 500,000 homes have been built has been built in our country since we came to office, and the PM has led that National Cabinet push to commit to try to build 1.2 million homes over the coming 5 years. Speaker, the incredible labour shortage that we inherited has dramatically improved, about a 44% reduction in vacancies for construction workers. The planning reforms that we initiated at the state level are starting to bear fruit. We're making real investments in modern construction approaches, and we're starting to see those improvements that we're all looking for. Speaker, housing completions across the country are up, and approvals across the country are up. Now, really importantly, Speaker, we are starting to make headway on those generational investments that our government has made on social and affordable housing. We made a commitment to deliver 55,000 social and affordable homes around the country. Speaker, I can report to you that as of today, we have 28,000 homes around the country in planning and construction. 28,000, Speaker. Now, I want to contrast that with the approach of those opposite who, as you know, didn't build a single social and affordable home in their entire first 2 terms in government, Speaker. We've got a plan to build 55,000 social and affordable homes. They've got a plan to build precisely 0. Now, Speaker, I'm asked about threats. Well, I think it's pretty obvious from here. The threat is actually sitting right in front of me. Coalition cuts are coming for housing, and we know if they win the election, $20 billion in housing funding is going to disappear overnight. Of course, Speaker, their housing policies, including their dud super for housing policy, are going to raise prices and build fewer homes, making the housing crisis worse. Like all of the social and economic problems facing our country, it's going to take a Labor government to address Australia's housing challenges, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Has concluded. Give a call to the Manager of Opposition Business.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. My question's to the Minister for Housing.
Oh, my apologies.
No, he wasn't on his.
Sorry.
He wasn't on his feet. I didn't see him.
Yeah. And my site was no. That's my order. I'll take responsibility. That's my fault because I couldn't see the member for Brisbane. It wasn't the manager's fault. Goes to side, just like we did yesterday. Order. We'll hear from the honourable member for Brisbane.
Thank you. My question is to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, why would you invite Donald Trump to Australia when you've got a Timu Trump sitting right opposite you?
That's as order. Order. That question is not within the standing orders. So, as I have done on numerous occasions, I will allow the member to rephrase that question. But if order, no, everyone has been given these opportunities, and so will the crossbench and members of minor parties. That question is not allowed. So it will have to be phrased directly for the Prime Minister's responsibilities, and I would prefer not to use those references to any members of Parliament. The member for Brisbane has the call.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister still. Given Trump's attacks on democracy and Western institutions and even threatening our allies and even the PBS, why would you invite him to Australia?
Prime Minister has the call.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. I thank the member for Brisbane for his question. And Australia has a long-standing relationship with the United States as our important ally since the Second World War. President Trump was elected by the American people last October. We respect democratic outcomes in Australia. It's something that I'm very proud of, that we have orderly transitions of power, and we had that between when Mr Morrison lost the election. There was an orderly transition of power. I've had two discussions with the President of the United States, once after he was elected, but secondly after his inauguration. Both of those conversations were some of the first that we had, and that, I think, reflects the respect that Australia is shown with the United States as important allies. The United States President will always be welcome in Australia. The United States President, I would expect, will attend the Quad meeting, which will be hosted here either next year or the year after. This year's Quad meeting is in India. The President of the United States has given me the courtesy of inviting me to visit the United States. I have returned the courtesy, as is normal practice. I will continue to engage in a respectful way, notwithstanding the fact that I have some different political views with different world leaders. But what I do is I engage respectfully across the board, and I act in Australia's national interest. And that is what people would expect of me. And I'll continue to do that. I'll continue to stand up for Australia's national interest, including, of course, with issues such as the pharmaceutical benefit scheme and other things that are uniquely Australian assets. They say a lot about who we are. The PBS is something that was introduced, of course, by the Chifley government. It's something of which the Australian Labor Party is particularly proud, and I'm proud that we've strengthened the PBS by not just having the decrease from $42.50 down to $30, but now the further increase that we support down to $25, as well as 60-day scripts and other measures that we have put in place. Just like Medicare, it is something that I will always defend, because I think that healthcare and accessibility is something that we should be proud of. If you compare our health system with the American health system, then what happens in this country is that people, no matter how wealthy you are or no matter how poor you are, you have access to proper health care. That's something we should be proud of, and that is something that I will always defend.
The call to the member for Chisholm.
Thank you so much, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. How has the Albanese Labor government been building Australia's future, and what alternative approaches are there?
The call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Chisholm for her question. And indeed, we have cut taxes, of course, for every single Australian taxpayer. We did that last year with legislation where we changed the legislated tax cuts of the Morrison government. We said that under the circumstances, we can do better than that. We can make sure that no Australian gets left behind. And that's why we delivered tax cuts for every taxpayer. And that's why last night the Senate passed legislation to give that tax cut for every taxpayer. I'm asked about alternatives to that plan, and of course we know now that those opposite absolutely want to raise taxes for everyone, We're strengthening Medicare on this side of the chamber. They want to gut it. We're growing wages. They want people to work longer for less. We've made medicines cheaper. They voted against cheaper medicines and tried to stop it, voted against it 6 times in this parliament.
We're cutting student debt by 20%. They want to stop that cut to student debt happening. We're building new energy now. They have a $600 billion nuclear energy plan. Sometime in the 2040s will deliver 4% of Australia's energy needs and push up energy prices. We're backing a future made in Australia. They want to send jobs and industries offshore. We're making free TAFE permanent. They want to end it. They regard it as waste and say that people don't value it if it's free. We're giving early educators a 15% pay rise. They mock it. We're supporting appropriate working from home and the right to disconnect.
Order.
They only want you to work at home if you're not getting paid. If you're not getting paid. That's what those opposite want.
Order. Members on my left. Order.
We're making childcare cheaper and available to all.
Order. Order. No. This is going to stop immediately. Ridiculous. Order. Leader of the Opposition. Everyone. Absolutely. Everyone. Members on my right. Show some respect. Prime Minister has the call.
Mr Speaker, we are delivering on the cost of living. They're cutting the cost of lunching. That's their priority, Mr Speaker. Only Labor governments do the big things. Better and fairer funding for every school. Strengthening Medicare so you can see a GP for free. Tax cuts for every single taxpayer. Moving to universal childcare. And a future made in Australia. Only Labor builds to last, Mr Speaker. Only Labor does the big reforms. Only Labor is building Australia's future. And on that note, Mr Speaker, I ask that further questions be placed on the notice paper.
Order. Order. And the House comes to order. The Prime Minister.